At 2 a.m., I found my daughter asleep at her desk, her cell phone still lit up beside her. I stepped closer and gently tucked a blanket around her shoulders, intending to let her rest. But when I glanced at the screen, my heart stopped. It was not a text message or a social media notification. It was an email in her sent folder, and what I read made my blood turn to ice. In that silent kitchen while my daughter slept from exhaustion, I realized the man sleeping upstairs was not her husband, but her executioner. Before I tell you what I did next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect a loved one from a snake they invited into their own home. My name is Winston Carter, and at 69 years old, most people see me as a harmless retired gardener. They see an old black man who moves a little too slow, who forgets where he put his reading glasses, and who spends his days tending to his hydrangeas. That is exactly what I want them to see. What they do not know is that for 30 years I was a senior forensic auditor for the FBI. I spent 3 decades tracking money laundering schemes, hunting down white-collar criminals, and dismantling corporate frauds that were far more sophisticated than the man sleeping in the master bedroom of this house. I bought this suburban Chicago home for my daughter Zoe and her husband Gavin 2 years ago. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where Zoe could build her architectural legacy and start a family. Instead, it had become a crime scene, and I was the only witness. I had woken up with a dry throat, the kind that comes with age and bad heating systems. The house was silent, settled into the deep quiet of the early morning. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps practiced, and light, a habit from years of fieldwork that never really goes away. The light from the kitchen spilled into the hallway, cutting a sharp yellow angle across the floorboards. I found Zoe slumped over the mahogany dining table. Her head rested on her folded arms, her breathing shallow and ragged. She looked thin, too thin. Her hair, which used to be a vibrant crown of curls, was pulled back in a messy, fraying bun. Scattered around her were blueprints, sketches, and coffee cups that had long since gone cold. She was working herself into an early grave. I knew she was under pressure. Her firm was competing for the Skyline project, a massive skyscraper contract that would define the Chicago skyline for the next century. It was the kind of project that made careers. It was also the kind of project that broke people. I walked over to turn off the lamp, but my eyes were drawn to her phone. It was plugged into her laptop, and the screen had not timed out. It was open to her email outbox. The subject line read, "Final Skyline Blueprints Complete Structural Analysis." I expected the recipient to be her boss or the firm's submission portal, but the name in the recipient field was Gavin Miller, her husband, my son-in-law. The timestamp was 1:55 a.m. just 5 minutes ago. I leaned in closer, squinting without my glasses, reading the body of the email. Gavin, I finished the structural load adjustments you asked for. I am sending this to your private email so you can format it for the presentation tomorrow. Please do not forget to add my name to the title slide this time. I am so tired I can barely see. Love you. My hand hovered over the phone. Why would she need to send her own work to her husband's private email for formatting? She was the architect. He was just a project manager. He did not design, he managed schedules. Something was wrong. The air in the kitchen felt suddenly heavy. Beside Zoe's phone, Gavin's tablet was sitting on a charging stand. It buzzed, a single short vibration that echoed loudly in the silence. The screen lit up. It was a text message from an unsaved number. Did the idiot send it yet? I stared at those words. The idiot. He was talking about my daughter, my Zoe, the girl who graduated top of her class, who could calculate load-bearing ratios in her head while he was still figuring out how to tie his tie. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me, but I forced it down. Rage is useless. Rage makes you sloppy. I needed to be cold. I needed to be the auditor again. I looked at Zoe sleeping so peacefully, unaware that she was being gutted by the person she trusted most. I carefully reached out and took her phone. I forwarded the email to an encrypted server I had maintained since my retirement. Then I took photos of the text message on Gavin's tablet using my own phone, ensuring the timestamp and the sender's number were visible. I needed more. One text message was suspicious, but it was not proof of a conspiracy. I needed to know who was on the other end of that phone and exactly what they were planning. I moved to Gavin's laptop, which was sitting closed on the kitchen island. I opened it. It was password protected, of course. But Gavin was arrogant, and arrogant men are predictable. He had used the same 6-digit passcode for the alarm system, the garage door, and his phone for the last 2 years. I typed in the date of his own birthday. The screen unlocked instantly. Narcissist. I did not have much time. If he woke up, if he came downstairs for water, if he heard a noise, this whole operation would be blown. He would spin a lie, gaslight Zoe, and lock me out. I needed a permanent window into his activities. I reached into the pocket of my robe. I always carried a small, high-capacity flash drive on my keychain, a habit from the bureau. On it was a piece of software I had written myself years ago, a keystroke logger. It was a ghost program. Once installed, it would run in the background, invisible to the task manager, invisible to antivirus software, recording every single key he pressed, every password, every email draft, every deleted message, every search history. I inserted the drive. The computer chimed softly and I froze, looking toward the ceiling. The floorboards in the master bedroom creaked. A heavy footstep, then another. He was awake. My heart hammered against my ribs, a sensation I had not felt since a raid in Detroit in '99. I forced my hands to remain steady. The install bar crawled across the screen, 20%, 40%. I could hear the bedroom door open upstairs. The hinges needed oiling. I made a mental note to never oil them. That squeak was my early warning system. 60%. The footsteps were in the hallway now, moving toward the stairs. Come on. Come on. I willed the technology to move faster. 80%. I could hear the heavy rhythmic thud of Gavin descending the stairs. He walked like a man who owned the world. He was halfway down. 99%. Done. I yanked the drive out and shoved it into my pocket. I closed the laptop lid just as his shadow stretched across the kitchen floor. I stepped back quickly, moving toward the refrigerator, grabbing a pitcher of water, acting as if I had just walked in. Gavin stepped into the light. He was wearing silk pajamas that probably cost more than my first car. He looked well rested, his skin smooth, his hair barely out of place. He spotted me, and for a split second his eyes narrowed. A flash of annoyance, a flash of suspicion, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by a smooth, practiced smile. "Winston," he said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "You are up late. Is everything okay?" I poured water into a glass, my hand trembling slightly. I let the tremble happen. It fit the character. Just thirsty Gavin. Old pipes are drying out. I gestured vaguely to my throat. He nodded, dismissing me as a threat immediately. He turned his attention to Zoe. The transformation was sickening to watch. He walked over to her, his face softening into a mask of concern. He picked up the blanket I had tucked around her and adjusted it, smoothing her hair. "Poor girl," he whispered loud enough for me to hear. "She works too hard. I keep telling her to slow down, but she is just so obsessive." He leaned down and kissed the top of her head. It looked like a gesture of love. But I was watching his eyes. They were not looking at her. They were looking at the laptop I had just closed. He was checking to see if it had been moved. He was checking the position of his tablet. He was calculating. "You should go back to bed, Winston," he said, turning to me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "I will carry her upstairs. She needs her rest. Tomorrow is a big day for her. For us," I corrected him, keeping my voice raspy and weak. "For the family." He chuckled a dry, soundless laugh. "Right, for the family. Good night, Winston." I shuffled out of the kitchen, playing the part of the tired old man dragging my slippers across the floor. I walked slowly up the stairs, holding the railing with both hands. I felt his eyes boring into my back until I turned the corner. As soon as I was in my room and the door was clicked shut, the act dropped. I stood straight. I took a deep breath, exhaling the rage that was burning in my chest. I sat down at my desk and opened my own secure laptop. I pulled up the remote dashboard for the software I had just installed. The connection established immediately. The status light turned green. Ghost is active. Downstairs, I heard Gavin moving around. I heard the click of his laptop opening. On my screen, a stream of text began to appear in real time. He was typing. I watched the letters form words one by one. He was replying to the text message from the unknown number. Got the file. The old man was wandering around, but he is too senile to notice anything. I am deleting her name from the file now. By tomorrow noon, the Skyline project will be mine, and she will be having a breakdown. I stared at the screen. The confirmation was absolute. This was not just theft. This was a demolition. He was planning to break her mind to steal her genius. Then another message appeared on my screen, incoming from the unknown number. "Good. Make sure she takes the pills in the morning. We need her confused during the board meeting. If she tries to speak, she needs to sound crazy. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face in the darkness. My hands, which had been trembling downstairs, were now perfectly still. They wanted to make her sound crazy. They wanted to steal her life's work. They thought they were dealing with a tired wife and a senile gardener. I looked at the time. It was 2:15 a.m. The board meeting was in 8 hours. They had a plan to destroy my daughter, but they had made one fatal miscalculation. They had let the auditor into the building. And I was not going to just watch. I was going to burn their entire plan to the ground. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. It rang once. "Yeah," a gruff voice answered. "It is late, Winston. This better be good." "It is not good," I said, my voice dropping to the low steel tone I used to use in the interrogation room. "But it is going to be fun. I need you to trace a number and get the van ready. We are going to work." The smell of fresh coffee usually signals a new beginning, but that morning it masked the scent of treachery. Sunlight streamed into the kitchen, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. To an outsider, it looked like a perfect domestic scene. My daughter Zoe was sitting at the island nursing a mug of black coffee while her husband Gavin buttered toast with the precision of a surgeon. But I knew better. I stood in the doorway, leaning on my cane, and watched the performance of a lifetime. Gavin was not just eating breakfast. He was dissecting my daughter's confidence piece by piece. On the counter between them lay the blueprints Zoe had agonized over the night before. Gavin tapped the paper with a manicured finger. His voice was low and smooth, like velvet wrapped around a jagged stone. "Zoe, honey, I do not know how to say this without upsetting you," he said, his face arranging itself into a mask of pained concern. "I stayed up until 4 in the morning fixing these load-bearing calculations. If I had submitted what you sent me last night, the board would have laughed us out of the room. You missed the structural integrity ratio by a factor of 3. Zoe shrank into herself. Her shoulders hunched and she stared into her coffee cup as if searching for a place to hide. I watched her hands tremble. These were the same hands that had built complex Lego structures at age 5 and drafted award-winning designs at 25. Now they shook with insecurity. "I checked it 3 times, Gavin," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I was sure I had the math right." Gavin sighed, the sound of a patient parent dealing with a slow child. He reached across the counter and covered her hand with his. "That is the problem, babe. You are exhausted. You are not thinking clearly. Remember last week when you forgot where you parked the car? Remember when you left the stove on? Your mind is fracturing under the stress. You are lucky I caught this mistake before the partners saw it. I saved you from professional suicide." I gripped my cane so hard my knuckles turned white. It was a lie. I had seen the email. I knew her work was perfect. He was not saving her. He was convincing her that she was broken so he could steal the pieces. "Here," Gavin said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small amber prescription bottle. "I refilled your vitamins. You forgot to take them yesterday, which explains why you were so scattered last night. Take 2. It will help you focus for the presentation." He shook 2 small blue pills into his palm and held them out to her. To anyone else, it looked like a loving husband, caring for his stressed wife. To me, it looked like an assassin loading his weapon. Zoe took the pills without hesitation. She swallowed them with a gulp of hot coffee. "Thank you, Gavin," she murmured. "I do not know what I would do without you. I feel like I am losing my mind lately. You would be lost without me." Gavin agreed with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "But I am here. I will always take care of the hard stuff for you." I forced myself to shuffle into the room, dragging my left foot slightly to sell the act. "Good morning," I rasped, keeping my voice thin and reedy. "Is there any coffee left for an old man?" Gavin looked up and the warmth vanished from his face, instantly replaced by a look of mild disgust. He checked his watch. "There is some in the pot, Winston. Try not to spill it this time. The cleaning lady just came yesterday." I moved to the coffee maker, moving with agonizing slowness. I needed to gauge how far his arrogance went. "So big day today," I asked my back to them. "Zoe is presenting that big building project, right? The Skyline thing." "It is called the Skyline Initiative," Winston, Gavin corrected sharply. "And no, Zoe is not presenting. We decided it is best if I handle the lead presentation. Zoe will be there for support." I turned around, feigning confusion. "But I thought Zoe drew the pictures. She spent all month in her office. I heard her typing." Gavin laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. Drew the pictures. God, Winston, you make it sound like she is in kindergarten with a box of crayons. Architecture is about vision and management, things that are a bit beyond your understanding. Just worry about your hydrangeas and let the adults handle the business. I looked at Zoe, waiting for her to defend herself, waiting for her to tell him that I was a former FBI auditor who had put men smarter than him behind bars, waiting for her to say that she was the genius and he was just the suit. Instead, she looked up at me with glazed eyes. The pills were already kicking in. "Dad, please," she said softly. "Do not annoy Gavin. He is under a lot of pressure fixing my mistakes. Just go sit in the garden, okay?" The words hit me harder than a physical blow. She was defending the parasite. He had twisted her reality so thoroughly that she saw him as her savior and me as a burden. I looked at Gavin. He was smirking. It was a subtle expression, a slight curling of the lip that said, "I won." He thought he was untouchable. He thought I was just a senile old man living on his charity. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "I have to go to the office early to reformat these files," he said. He leaned down and kissed Zoe on the cheek. "Rest for another hour, babe. You look terrible. I will send a car for you at 10. He grabbed his keys and the roll of blueprints. As he walked past me, he did not even make eye contact. He just brushed past me as if I were a piece of furniture. I waited. I counted the seconds. I heard the front door open and close. I heard the beep of his luxury sedan unlocking. I heard the engine roar to life and fade down the street. Only then did I drop the act. I straightened my back. The shuffle disappeared. I walked over to the window and watched his car disappear around the corner. Then I turned my eyes to the amber bottle left on the counter. "Zoe," I said, my voice firm and clear, "why do you not go lie down upstairs? The couch is more comfortable." She blinked, looking at me with confusion. Her speech was already slurring slightly. "Yeah, good idea, Dad. I am just so tired." "Oh," I helped her up the stairs. My heart broke with every step as she leaned heavily on me. I tucked her into bed, pulling the shades to block out the sun. "Sleep, Zoe," I whispered. "I will watch over the house." As soon as her breathing deepened into a heavy, chemically induced sleep, I ran back downstairs. I went straight to the kitchen counter. The amber bottle was sitting there. The label read, "Multi-Vitamin Complex." It looked professional, it looked legitimate. I opened the bottle and tipped one blue pill into a tissue. I wrapped it carefully, avoiding touching it with my skin. I did not want to contaminate the sample. I put the tissue in my pocket and put the bottle back exactly where it had been. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I grabbed my car keys. I drove to a small pharmacy on the south side of Chicago. It was not a chain store. It was a family-owned place run by an old friend named Elias. We had worked together on a few narcotics cases back in the day when the Bureau needed off-the-record analysis. The bell chimed as I walked in. The store was empty. Elias was behind the counter sorting inventory. He looked up and smiled, his eyes widening behind thick glasses. "Winston Carter," he boomed. "I have not seen you since the retirement party. To what do I owe the honor? Are the joints acting up?" "No pleasantries today, Elias," I said, locking the door behind me and flipping the sign to closed. "I need a favor, and I need it fast." I pulled the tissue from my pocket and placed the blue pill on the glass counter. Elias looked at it, his smile fading as he saw the intensity in my eyes. "What is this?" he asked, picking it up with a pair of tweezers. "My son-in-law is giving this to my daughter," I said, my voice tight. "He says it is a vitamin. I do not believe him." Elias frowned. He walked back to his lab area. "Give me 5 minutes." Those 5 minutes felt like 5 years. I paced the small store looking at the rows of cough syrup and aspirin. I thought about Zoe. I thought about the fog in her eyes. I thought about the way her hands shook. If I was wrong, if this was just a vitamin, then I was a paranoid old man who was judging a bad husband too harshly. But my gut told me I was not wrong. In 30 years, my gut had never been wrong. Elias came back out. He was not smiling anymore. He looked pale. "Winston," he said quietly, placing his hands on the counter, "you need to get your daughter to a hospital, or at least get her off these immediately." "What is it?" I asked. "It is not a vitamin," Elias said grimly. "This is a high-dose benzodiazepine derivative. It is similar to triazolam, but mixed with a muscle relaxant. It is used for severe insomnia or pre-surgery sedation. What does it do to a person if they take it every morning with coffee? I asked, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. Elias took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. It causes confusion, memory loss, poor motor coordination. And if you take it while trying to work it, induces a state of high suggestibility. Basically, it turns your brain into mush. You would not be able to remember your own name, let alone do complex math. Long-term use can cause permanent cognitive damage. The silence in the pharmacy was deafening. The pieces fell into place with a terrifying click. The mistakes in the blueprints. The lost keys. The confusion. Zoe was not losing her mind. She was being chemically lobotomized. Gavin was not just stealing her work. He was systematically deleting her intellect so she could never fight back. He was erasing the brilliant woman I raised and replacing her with a compliant ghost. I thanked Elias and walked out into the bright Chicago morning. The sun felt cold on my skin. I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel until the leather creaked. I looked at the photo of the pill on my phone. This was not just a bad marriage. This was attempted murder of the soul. Gavin Miller had declared war on my family. He thought he was playing a clever game. He thought he was the predator. But as I started the engine and felt the old cold focus of the hunter return, I knew he had made a fatal error. He forgot to check the background of the gardener. And now, the gardener was coming to weed him out. The cold wind off Lake Michigan whipped against my coat as I stepped out of the pharmacy, but the chill in my bones had nothing to do with the weather. I had the pills. I had the confirmation that my daughter was being drugged. Now I needed to find out why. Crimes like this are rarely crimes of passion. They are crimes of calculation. And in my 30 years at the Bureau, I learned one universal truth. If you want to find the motive, you follow the money. I drove straight to the downtown branch of Sovereign Trust. This was where Zoe and Gavin held their joint accounts and where I had set up the trust fund for the house. The building was a fortress of glass and steel designed to make you feel small. I walked in leaning heavily on my cane, playing the part of the confused senior citizen to perfection. The security guard barely glanced at me. I was just background noise to them. I requested to see the branch manager. A young man named Sterling, who wore a suit that was too tight and a smile that was too fake, came out to the lobby. He knew me only as Zoe's elderly father, the one who sometimes came in to deposit small pension checks. He did not know that 20 years ago I had led the investigation that saved this bank from a money laundering indictment. "Mr. Carter," he said, checking his watch impatiently. "How can I help you today? If it is about a withdrawal, the tellers can assist you. I need to see the full transaction history for the joint account and the mortgage line of credit," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. Sterling sighed, a sound of condescension escaping his lips. "Sir, we have gone over this. You are a trustee on the property deed, but you are not the primary account holder on the daily checking. I cannot just show you private statements without Gavin or Zoe present. Privacy laws are very strict." I looked around the lobby. It was busy. I took a step closer to him, dropping the facade of the frail old man. My posture straightened, my eyes locked onto his. "Listen to me very carefully, Sterling. I know about the structuring protocols you use for high-value transfers. I know that if I make a phone call to the regional oversight director who happens to owe me a favor from the Enron days, he will be very interested in why this branch has been flagging compliance overrides on my daughter's account." Sterling blinked. The color drained from his face. He looked at me, and for the first time he saw the predator behind the grandfatherly mask. "I want the statements," I said, my voice like grinding gravel. "I want to see every penny that has moved in or out of that house in the last 6 months, and I want to see it now in your office with the door closed." 5 minutes later, I was sitting in his leather chair staring at a computer screen that confirmed my worst fears. It was a bloodbath. The savings account, which had held $50,000 of Zoe's bonuses, was empty. It had been drained in a series of transfers to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. But that was just the beginning. There was a second mortgage taken out on the house, a home equity line of credit for $400,000 approved 3 weeks ago. I stared at the digital signature on the approval document. It said Zoe Carter. But the timestamp was from a Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. Zoe had been at a site visit in Wisconsin that day. I knew because I had driven her to the airport. Gavin had forged her signature using her digital ID. "Where did this money go?" I asked, pointing at the screen. Sterling was sweating now, typing furiously. "It was wired immediately to a cryptocurrency exchange. Once it hits the blockchain, it is virtually untraceable, Mr. Carter. It is gone." I sat back, feeling the weight of the betrayal. Gavin had not just stolen their savings. He had leveraged the house. He had stolen the equity I had gifted them. He was cashing out. He was stripping the copper from the walls before he burned the building down. He was planning to leave Zoe homeless, bankrupt, and broken. I printed everything. I thanked Sterling, who looked like he was about to be sick, and walked out. I had the what and the how. Now I needed the who. Men like Gavin do not steal $500,000 just to sit on it. They steal it to spend it. And they usually spend it on someone. I pulled up the GPS tracker app on my phone. I had not just installed a keylogger on his laptop. When I fixed his car's radiator last month, I had slipped a magnetic tracker inside the rear bumper. The dot on the map was blinking. He was not at the office. He was at Le Petit Jardin, a French bistro in the most expensive district of the city. I drove there, my hands steady on the wheel. The bistro was the kind of place where a salad cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I parked down the street and walked up, pulling my hat low. I spotted Gavin's car immediately. It was parked right in front in a valet spot. I did not go inside. It was too risky. Instead, I walked around to the side of the building where the patio seating was enclosed by a high hedge. I could hear voices. I moved along the hedge, looking for a gap in the foliage. There he was. Gavin was sitting at a corner table, laughing. He looked relaxed, victorious. Across from him sat a woman. She was stunning in a sharp, predatory way. Blonde hair, slicked back designer sunglasses resting on her head, and a suit that screamed power. I recognized her immediately. Bella Sterling. Her father owned Sterling Architects, the biggest rival to Zoe's firm. This was not just an affair. This was corporate espionage. I adjusted the hearing aid in my left ear. It was not a hearing aid, of course. It was a high-gain sound amplifier, a piece of tech I had kept from my surveillance days. I turned the dial, filtering out the street noise and focusing on their table. Their voices came through clear and crisp, as if I were sitting right next to them. "Baby, you should have seen her this morning," Gavin was saying, taking a sip of white wine. She was a mess. She was shaking so bad she could barely hold her coffee. I told her she was losing her mind, and she thanked me for helping her. Bella laughed, a cruel tinkling sound. "That is pathetic." "And the files." "Sent them to you last night," Gavin said. "I stripped her name off everything. By the time I present the Skyline concept tomorrow, everyone will think it is my brainchild. Your dad is ready to hire me, right?" "As soon as you bring the contract," Bella promised, reaching across the table to stroke his hand. "Dad promised you the VP position." "And the signing bonus." "What about the money from the house?" Gavin asked, lowering his voice. "It is safe," Bella said. "Converted to Bitcoin and sitting in the cold wallet. We can access it as soon as we land in Rio." I felt a wave of nausea. They were planning to run. They were going to let Zoe crash and burn at the presentation, steal her career, steal her home, and then vanish to South America with her money. "But what about the divorce?" Gavin asked. "If she contests it, she might freeze the accounts." Bella smirked. "She will not contest anything, Gavin. By tomorrow afternoon, she will be in a psychiatric hold. You said you were taking care of it." I froze. I pressed the amplifier tighter into my ear. "I am," Gavin said. "I upped the dosage today. The doctor said long-term use causes confusion, but high doses cause hallucinations and paranoia." I watched through the leaves as Gavin swirled his wine glass, looking at the liquid with a detached amusement. "She took 2 pills this morning," he continued. "I ground up another one into her dinner for tonight. I just need to give her 3 more doses before tomorrow morning. By the time she walks into that boardroom, she will not be able to form a coherent sentence. She will be drooling on the table. The board will have no choice but to remove her and hand the project to me." I stepped back from the hedge, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was not just greed. It was not just theft. It was a calculated medical dismantling of a human being. 3 more doses. He was going to overdose her. He was going to push her brain past the breaking point just to ensure his victory. I looked at the time. It was early afternoon. Zoe was at home, probably sleeping off the morning dose. Gavin would be home in a few hours to administer the next poison. I walked back to my car. I was done investigating. I was done watching. The auditor was finished with his report. Now it was time for the enforcer to go to work. I had the evidence to send him to prison for 20 years. But prison was too good for him. I wanted to destroy him. I wanted him to walk into that boardroom thinking he was a king and leave it in handcuffs. I started the engine. The roar of the motor matched the fury in my blood. I was going home to prepare dinner. and I had a special recipe in mind for my son-in-law. 3 doses, he had said. Well, 2 could play at that game, and I knew exactly which pills were in that bottle now. I pulled out into traffic, cutting off a taxi. I did not care. The old man was gone. The father was on a warpath. And Gavin Miller had no idea that the prey he was hunting was actually the bait in a trap that was about to snap his neck. The crystal chandeliers of the Fairmont Hotel ballroom shimmered like diamonds overhead, but to me they looked like cold, unfeeling eyes watching a tragedy unfold. The annual gala for the Architecture Guild of Chicago was the event of the season. It was a room filled with egos, expensive suits, and the smell of ambition. And right in the center of it was my son-in-law, Gavin Miller, shining like a polished coin. He wore a bespoke tuxedo that fit him perfectly. He moved through the crowd with the ease of a man who owned the room, shaking hands, laughing at jokes, and flashing that charming smile that had fooled everyone, including my daughter. Beside him stood Zoe. My heart ached just looking at her. The brilliant, vibrant woman who had designed half the buildings in this portfolio looked like a ghost haunting her own life. The high dose of sedatives Gavin had slipped into her coffee that morning was doing its terrible work. Her skin was pale, almost gray against her emerald evening gown, a gown that hung loosely on her frame because she had lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks. Her hair, usually styled with precision, was slightly frizzy, a stray curl falling over her forehead that she kept brushing away with a trembling hand. I walked a few paces behind them, clutching my cane, acting the part of the confused elderly father dragged along to a fancy party. I saw the way people looked at them. They looked at Gavin with admiration. "Look at him," they whispered. "So young, so successful, and so patient with his wife." Then they looked at Zoe with a mixture of pity and judgment. Gavin stopped to talk to the chairman of the board, a man named Harrison, who held the keys to the Skyline project. "Gavin, my boy," Harrison boomed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Good to see you." And Zoe blinked, trying to focus. "Hello, Mr. Harrison," she said, but her words were thick and slurred. It sounded like she had been drinking since noon. Harrison frowned slightly, but Gavin stepped in smoothly, wrapping an arm around Zoe's waist. It looked like a hug, but I saw his fingers dig into her rib cage. A warning squeeze. "Zoe has been having a hard time lately," Gavin said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "The stress of the project has really taken a toll on her health. We are trying to get her to rest, but you know how stubborn she is." Harrison nodded gravely. "Of course. Mental health is so important. You are a good man, Gavin, for supporting her through this." Zoe tried to speak to defend herself. I am fine," she stammered. The calculations." Gavin cut her off with a laugh that sounded indulgent. "See what I mean? She is still worrying about math. Honey, just relax. I have taken care of everything." He was erasing her in plain sight. He was painting a picture of a woman on the edge of a breakdown and using her actual drugged state as the paint. I stood there, gripping my cane, forcing myself not to strike him. Not yet. I needed them to underestimate us until the very last second. The waiter passed by with a tray of champagne flutes. Gavin grabbed 2 and handed one to Zoe. "Here, babe, maybe this will help you relax," he said. I wanted to scream. Alcohol mixed with benzodiazepines was a recipe for disaster. It would amplify the confusion tenfold, but I could not stop it without breaking cover. Zoe took the glass, her hand shaking violently. We moved deeper into the room. The noise of the party was deafening, a cacophony of laughter and clinking glasses. I adjusted the volume on my hearing aid, tuning it to the frequency of the microphone I had planted in Gavin's lapel earlier that evening. I stayed close, fading into the background near a large potted fern. Zoe was trying to engage in conversation with a former colleague, a woman she had mentored. I saw the blueprints for the atrium, Zoe said, her voice trembling. "The light refraction. It is wrong." The colleague looked at Gavin, comfortably ignoring Zoe. "Is she okay, Gavin?" Gavin sighed, shaking his head. "We are adjusting her medication. It is a process. Honestly, it is like taking care of a child sometimes." And then it happened. The moment Gavin had been engineering all night. Zoe turned too quickly, trying to face her colleague. Her coordination, compromised by the drugs, failed her. Her heel caught on the thick, plush carpet. She stumbled forward. Her arm flailed out to catch her balance. The champagne flute flew from her hand. Time seemed to slow down. I watched the crystal glass arc through the air, catching the light of the chandeliers before crashing onto the pristine white tablecloth of the buffet table. Smash. The sound cut through the chatter of the ballroom like a gunshot. Red wine from a nearby decanter that she also knocked over spilled across the white linen, spreading like a fresh bloodstain. The entire room went silent. The music stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned to stare at Zoe. She stood there frozen, horrified, her hand covering her mouth. "I am sorry," she whimpered. "I am so sorry." Gavin moved instantly. He did not move to comfort her. He moved to secure his narrative. He rushed to her side, grabbing her shoulders. But instead of hugging her, he shook her slightly, just enough to make her look unstable. He leaned in close to her ear. To the room it looked like he was whispering words of comfort. But through my earpiece his voice came through crystal clear, venomous and cold. "You are useless. You are an embarrassment to me. Look at everyone staring at you. They think you are a drunk. They think you are crazy. Why do you not just go die somewhere so I can finish this?" Zoe sobbed, her knees buckling. Gavin looked up at the crowd, his face a mask of tragic heroism. "I am so sorry, everyone," he announced, his voice projecting to the back of the room. "My wife is not feeling well. Please excuse us." He signaled to a waiter. "Can you help my father-in-law take her to the car? I need to clean this up." The crowd murmured in sympathy. Poor Gavin. Stuck with such a mess of a wife. I stepped forward, allowing my shuffle to return. "Come on, Zoe," I said softly, taking her arm. "Let us go." I led her away, her body shaking with sobs. I handed her off to the valet outside, instructing him to let her sit in the car with the heat on. I told him I had to go back inside to use the restroom. I did not go to the restroom. I went hunting. I found Gavin in the men's executive washroom. He was standing in front of the mirror, scrubbing a speck of red wine off his white tuxedo cuff. He was humming. He was actually humming a happy tune. The door closed behind me, leaving us alone in the tiled silence. Gavin saw me in the mirror. He did not turn around. "Did you put her in the car, Winston?" he asked. His tone bored. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice raspy. "She is crying, Gavin. She says she feels sick." Gavin laughed. "She is sick, all right. Is sick. Sick in the head. And you know what, Winston, after tonight I am done playing nurse." He turned around, leaning back against the marble sink, crossing his arms. "As soon as I get that contract tomorrow, things are going to change. I am putting the house on the market next week." I blinked, feigning confusion. "But where will we live?" Gavin chuckled. "There is no we, old man. I am moving into a penthouse in the city. Zoe is going to a facility where they can handle her condition. And you." He stepped closer to me, towering over my hunched form. He poked me in the chest with a hard finger. "I found a place for you, too. It is called Shady Pines. It is state-funded. It smells like urine and boiled cabbage, and the staff barely speaks English. But it is cheap, and that is all you are worth to me, a cheap problem that needs to be filed away." He smirked, fixing his bow tie. "Do not look so shocked. You lived off my charity for 2 years. The ride is over. Pack your bags tonight, Winston. Tomorrow you are garbage." He patted my cheek, a humiliating, condescending tap. Then he turned and walked out of the bathroom, whistling that same happy tune. The heavy door swung shut. The silence returned. I stood there for a long moment, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. Then I slowly straightened my back. The curve in my spine vanished. The tremble in my hand stopped instantly. I rolled my neck, hearing a satisfying crack of tension releasing. I walked over to the mirror. The man looking back at me was not a confused gardener. The eyes were not cloudy with age. They were sharp, clear, and burning with a cold, focused fire. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a microfiber cloth. I wiped the spot on my cheek where he had touched me, as if wiping away a smudge of dirt. I looked at my reflection. I adjusted my tie, tightening the knot with precision. "You made a mistake, Gavin," I said to the empty room, my voice deep and steady. "You thought you were fighting a sheep. You did not check the teeth. I threw the cloth into the trash can. You just signed your death warrant, son." I turned and walked out of the bathroom. I did not shuffle. I marched. The time for observation was over. The operation had just entered the termination phase. The recordings were good, but they were not enough. I sat in my car parked 2 blocks away from my own house, staring at the rain-slicked windshield. On the other end of the secure line was Elena Russo. Elena was not just a lawyer. She was a shark I had trained myself back when she was a rookie legal analyst for the Bureau. Now she ran the most vicious litigation firm in Chicago. Her voice came through the speaker sharp and devoid of sympathy. "Winston, the audio is compelling, but it is circumstantial. In a civil court, Gavin's lawyers will argue that the recordings were obtained illegally. They will claim he was role-playing or that the context was manipulated. If we want to freeze his assets before the board meeting, and if we want to get a restraining order that actually sticks, we need the source files." I gripped the steering wheel. I knew what she was asking. I needed the digital footprint. I needed the metadata. "He uses an iPad Pro," I said, watching the windshield wipers slash back and forth. "He does everything on it. The transfers, the emails to Bella, the schematics he stole from Zoe. It is all there." "Then get it," Elena said. "I need you to clone the drive. But Winston, there is a catch. If he has encrypted the drive with biometric security, we cannot crack it remotely. Not in time. You need his fingerprint or his face." I looked at the house down the street. It was dark. The predator was sleeping in his cave. "He uses a fingerprint lock," I said, remembering the way he pressed his thumb to the screen this morning. "Then you know what you have to do," Elena said. "Call me when you have the data. Do not get caught, Winston. If he wakes up and sees you, he will claim self-defense and shoot you. And honestly, with the laws in this state, he would probably get away with it." I hung up the phone. The rain hammered against the roof of the car, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding in my chest. I was 69 years old. My knees ached when it rained. My reflexes were not what they used to be in 95. But as I drove the car back to the driveway and silenced the engine, I felt a cold calm settle over me. This was not a break-in. This was an extraction, and the target was sleeping next to my daughter. I entered the house through the side door, which I had left unlocked. The air inside was warm and smelled of the lavender diffuser Zoe used to try and calm her anxiety. The silence was heavy. I took off my shoes, moving in my socks. I climbed the stairs one by one, counting them in my head, just like I did when I was sweeping a building. 1, 2, skip the third one because it creaks. 4, 5. I reached the landing. The door to the master bedroom was slightly ajar. I could hear the rhythmic sound of breathing, one heavy and deep. That was Gavin. One shallow and chemically induced. That was Zoe. I pushed the door open inches at a time. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I slipped into the room. The only light came from the street lamp outside, filtering through the sheer curtains, casting long, skeletal shadows across the floor. I crept toward Gavin's side of the bed. He was sprawled out on his back, his mouth slightly open, one arm hanging off the side of the mattress. On the nightstand next to a glass of water sat the iPad. It was right there, the key to saving my daughter's life. I reached out and picked it up. It felt heavy in my hand, cold and sleek. I pressed the home button. The screen lit up blindingly bright in the darkness. I flinched, shielding the light with my body. Touch ID or enter passcode. I looked at Gavin. He was deep in sleep, but sleep is a fragile thing. I needed his thumb. I needed to physically lift the hand of the man who was poisoning my child and press it against this glass screen without waking him up. I knelt down beside the bed. The smell of him was overpowering. Expensive cologne and stale wine. I hated him so much in that moment that I wanted to wrap my hands around his throat instead of his thumb. But I forced the rage down. Rage is noise. I needed silence. I reached out and gently, very gently, cupped his hand. His skin was warm, his fingers were relaxed. I isolated his thumb. I moved the iPad closer, hovering at millimeters from his skin. Suddenly, Gavin shifted. I froze. I stopped breathing. I became a statue in the darkness. Gavin groaned, rolling his head to the side. He smacked his lips and mumbled something incoherent. His hand twitched in mine. If he pulled away now, if he opened his eyes, it was over. He would see a dark figure looming over him. He would reach for the gun I knew he kept in the top drawer. I waited. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. The rhythm of his breathing returned to a deep snore. He had not woken up. I exhaled slowly through my nose. I moved the iPad again. This time I did not hesitate. I pressed the sensor against his thumb. Click. The screen unlocked. The rows of apps appeared. I had access. I did not breathe a sigh of relief yet. I was still in the lion's den. I stood up slowly, backing away from the bed, moving toward the ensuite bathroom where I could work with the door closed. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and pulled the high-speed flash drive from my pocket. I plugged it into the lightning port. I launched the extraction protocol. The progress bar appeared, copying files. It was agonizingly slow. The sheer amount of data Gavin had on this device was staggering. Photos, videos, encrypted chats, banking apps. The bar crawled. 10%, 20%. I checked my watch. It was 3:02 a.m. 02. Outside in the bedroom, Gavin coughed. I tensed, watching the crack under the bathroom door. Silence returned. 50%. I started looking through the file structure while it copied. I needed to make sure I was getting the right things. I found a folder named Skyline. Inside were Zoe's original drawings, but the metadata had been scrubbed and replaced with Gavin's author tag. I found another folder named Cayman. That was the money, 70%. Suddenly, the iPad in my hands vibrated violently. I almost dropped it. The screen lit up with an incoming FaceTime call. The name on the screen was Bella with a heart emoji. Panic surged through me. It was 3 a.m. Why was she calling? If the ringing did not wake him, the vibration on the hard surface of the nightstand would have. But the iPad was in my hands. However, the Bluetooth connection was still active. Out in the bedroom on the nightstand, Gavin's Apple Watch began to vibrate and chime, echoing the call. Ping, ping, ping. I heard the bed spring squeak. Gavin groaned louder this time. What the hell, he mumbled sleepily. I stared at the progress bar. 90%. I could not cancel the call, or he would see the notification on the iPad screen that it was declined by user. I had to let it ring. Gavin was fumbling for his phone on the nightstand. I heard his hand slapping the wood. Where is it? He muttered. He was looking for the iPad. He was reaching for the empty space where the device was supposed to be. 95%. I yanked the flash drive out. I did not wait for the safely removed notification. I killed the screen and held my breath. Gavin was sitting up now. I could hear the rustle of the sheets. Babe, he whispered aggressively. Babe, are you calling me? Zoe mumbled something in her drugged sleep. Gavin swore under his breath. He found his watch and silenced the call. Then he turned on the bedside lamp. The light flooded the room and spilled under the bathroom door. If he walked to the bathroom, if he needed to use the toilet, I was cornered. I gripped my cane ready to swing. I was too old to fight fair. If he came through that door, I would take his knees out. But he did not get up. He was looking for the iPad. I must have left it downstairs, he muttered to himself. Idiot. He sighed heavily and turned off the light. He lay back down. I waited 5 full minutes in the dark bathroom, hugging the iPad to my chest. When his snoring resumed, I slipped out. I placed the iPad back on the nightstand exactly where it had been. I ghosted out of the room, down the stairs, and out into the cool night air. My hands were shaking now. The adrenaline dump was hitting me hard. I sat in my car and plugged the flash drive into my own laptop to verify the data. The files were all there. The theft, the fraud, the affair. But then I saw a folder I had missed in the rush. It was buried deep in the system inside a folder marked Miscellaneous Expenses. The folder name was simply Plan B. My blood ran cold. I opened it. Inside were photos of my car, my vintage Mustang that I kept in the garage. There were schematics of the brake lines. There were screenshots of a chat with a mechanic named Razor who specialized in making accidents look like mechanical failures. And there was a text message draft from Gavin to Bella dated 2 days ago. If the old man does not agree to the nursing home, we go with Plan B. Razor says he can cut the line so it snaps only when he hits highway speeds. It will be quick. A tragic accident for a tragic old man. I stared at the screen. The rain pounded against the roof of the car, harder now, isolating me in a bubble of horror. He was not just going to lock me away. He was going to kill me. He had already paid the deposit. I looked up at the dark window of the master bedroom. I felt a tear run down my cheek, but it was not from fear. It was from a realization so sharp it cut me deeper than any knife. He wanted me dead because I was the only one standing between him and total control. I closed the laptop. I wiped the tear away. You want a war, Gavin, I whispered to the dark house. You want to cut my brakes. I started the engine. You just cut your own throat. Because now I am not just fighting for my daughter's money. I am fighting for our lives. And I do not take prisoners. The sound of a zipper closing usually signals a journey, but this time it sounded like a surrender. I packed my life into 2 battered leather suitcases. I moved slowly, deliberately, letting my hands tremble as I folded my shirts. I needed to sell this performance. I needed Gavin to believe that he had won, that he had successfully broken the old man's spirit. I looked around the guest room that had been my sanctuary for the last 2 years. I left a few things behind. A book on the nightstand, a pair of reading glasses on the dresser, signs of a hasty departure, signs of an old man who was too confused to pack properly. I dragged the suitcases to the top of the stairs. The wheels bumped loudly against the wood, a rhythmic thud that echoed through the silent house. Down in the foyer, they were waiting for me. It looked like a tableau from a funeral. Zoe was sitting on the bottom step, her face buried in her hands, weeping softly. Gavin was standing by the door, checking his watch. He was wearing his serious face, the one he used when he was firing employees. But I knew him better now. I could see the tension in his jaw, not from sadness, but from the effort of suppressing a grin. I stopped halfway down the stairs, breathing heavily. I let my shoulders slump. I made myself look smaller. I made myself look like exactly what he said I was. A burden. "I am ready, Gavin," I said, my voice cracking just enough. "The taxi is outside." Zoe looked up. Her eyes were swollen, red-rimmed, and glassy from the drugs. She tried to stand, but stumbled. "Dad, no," she sobbed, reaching for the banister. "You do not have to go. This is your house, too. We can figure this out." "Gavin, please do not make him go." Gavin stepped forward, putting a restraining hand on her shoulder. It looked gentle, but I saw his knuckles turn white. "We talked about this, honey," he said, his voice dripping with fake syrup. "It is for his own safety. He is forgetting things. He is leaving the stove on." Shady Pines has professionals who can watch him 24 hours a day. We cannot provide that kind of care. We have the Skyline presentation tomorrow. We have to be practical. "Practical," Zoe cried, burying her face in his chest. "It feels cruel." "It is kindness," Gavin insisted, smoothing her hair while looking directly at me. His eyes were cold, dead sharks swimming in blue water. "It is the kindest thing we can do." "Right, Winston." I gripped the handle of my suitcase. I wanted to throw it at him. I wanted to march down those stairs and break his nose, but I swallowed the rage. I let it burn in my gut, fueling the plan. "You are right, Gavin," I said, lowering my head. "I am just in the way here. I do not want to be a burden to Zoe anymore. She needs to focus on her career. She does not need to worry about a senile old man." Gavin nodded, solemn and victorious. "I appreciate you understanding that, Winston. I really do. I have already paid the first month at the facility. The driver knows where to go. He picked up my suitcases. He was eager. He wanted me out of the door before I could change my mind. He carried them to the curb with a spring in his step. I walked down the stairs, one agonizing step at a time. When I reached the bottom, Zoe threw her arms around me. She was shaking violently. She felt so frail in my arms, like a bird with broken wings. This was the hardest part, leaving her here with the wolf, even for an hour, even for a day. It went against every instinct I had as a father, but I had to trust the plan. I had to trust her strength. I hugged her tight. I pulled her close, shielding her face from Gavin, who was busy talking to the taxi driver outside. I had 10 seconds. 10 seconds to undo the brainwashing. 10 seconds to save her life. I leaned down and pressed my lips to her ear. I switched my tone. The raspy old man voice vanished. I spoke with the sharp, clear authority of the agent she remembered from her childhood. "Listen to me, Zoe," I whispered, urgent and low. "Do not react. Keep crying. Just listen." She stiffened in my arms, but she did not pull away. "I am not leaving you," I whispered. "This is a trap. I am setting a trap for him." "Dad," she breathed, her voice trembling with confusion. I gripped her shoulders tighter. "The blue pills are poison, Zoe. He is drugging you. Do not take them. I replaced the ones in your travel case with sugar pills. Take those instead. You need your mind clear for tomorrow." She started to pull back to look at me, but I held her close. "Do not look at me," I commanded softly. "Trust me. Remember our code word from when you were little. Remember what we said when you were scared of the thunder." "Protocol Bluebird," she whispered, the memory cutting through the fog of the drugs. Protocol Bluebird. I confirmed. Stay safe until the cavalry arrives. I will be watching you. Every second. Now cry. Cry loud so he hears you. I released her. Zoe let out a sob that was half real anguish and half performance. She buried her face in her hands, turning away from the door. I love you, sweetheart, I said loudly for Gavin's benefit. Be a good girl for your husband. I walked out the door. The air outside was crisp. Gavin was holding the taxi door open. He looked like he had just won the lottery. Take care of yourself, Winston, he said, offering me a hand. I ignored it. You take care of her, Gavin, I said, staring him down one last time. She is all I have. Do not worry. He smiled, closing the door. She is in good hands. The taxi pulled away. I watched through the rear window as Gavin stood on the curb. He did not wave. As soon as the car turned the corner, I saw him pull out his phone. He was not calling Zoe to check on her. He was making the call he had been waiting to make for months. Driver, pull over here, I said as soon as we were out of sight. But sir, the facility is across town, the driver said, confused. I handed him $100 bill. Change of plans. Drop me at that black van parked on the corner of Elm and 4th. I got out of the taxi, dragging my suitcases. I walked to the nondescript black utility van parked under the shade of a large oak tree. It looked like a plumber's work truck. Dirty, unassuming, invisible. I unlocked the back doors and climbed inside. The interior was not a plumber's van. It was a mobile command center. Banks of monitors lined the walls, humming with low electronic static. I sat down in the swivel chair and put on my headset. My fingers flew across the keyboard. One by one, the screens flickered to life. Camera 1, living room. Camera 2, kitchen. Camera 3, master bedroom. I was back in the house. I saw Gavin walking back inside. He did not go to comfort Zoe. He walked straight past her as she sat weeping on the stairs. He went into the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of champagne. He popped the cork, the sound exploding like a gunshot on my audio feed. Then he pulled out his phone. I synced the audio. Hello, gorgeous, he said, his voice booming in my headset. It is done. The trash has been taken out. Come over. We are celebrating. I watched as he hung up. He walked over to the front door and opened it again. But this time he was not letting anyone out. A work van pulled into the driveway. A man in blue coveralls got out carrying a drill. A locksmith. He was changing the locks immediately. He was making sure I could never use my key again. He was sealing the tomb. I want deadbolts on front and back, Gavin told the locksmith. And I want them now. I do not care what it costs. I sat in the dark van, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in my eyes. I opened a thermos of black coffee and took a sip. Go ahead, Gavin, I whispered, watching him pour a glass of champagne. Lock the doors. Bar the windows. Dig a moat if you want. On the screen, I saw Zoe stand up. She wiped her eyes. She looked at the camera hidden in the smoke detector. For a fleeting second, she nodded. Just a tiny, imperceptible nod. Then she turned and walked upstairs to her room, not staggering this time, but walking with purpose. She had heard me. Protocol Bluebird was active. 20 minutes later, a red convertible pulled into the driveway. Bella stepped out looking like a movie star in a trench coat and stilettos. She walked into my house like she owned it. Gavin met her at the door. He pulled her into a kiss that was disgusting in its intensity right there in the foyer where his wife's tears were still drying on the floorboards. Finally, Bella laughed, throwing her coat onto the chair I used to sit in to read the newspaper. I thought that old fossil would never leave. He is gone, baby, Gavin said, handing her a glass. He is rotting in a state home by now, and tomorrow the company is ours. They clinked glasses. I leaned forward, adjusting the gain on the microphone. I watched them toast to their victory. I watched them toast to my demise. Enjoy the champagne, I said to the screen, my finger hovering over the record button, because it is the last thing you will ever taste as free people. I settled back in the chair. The night was young, the coffee was hot, and I had the best seat in the house for the end of the world. I was not going anywhere. I was just getting started. The glow of the monitors was the only light in the cramped surveillance van, but it felt like the fires of hell were burning right in front of my eyes. I was parked 2 streets away, staring at the live feed from my own living room. It was torture. Absolute calculated torture. Inside the house, Gavin was pacing back and forth while Zoe sat curled up on the sofa, hugging her knees to her chest. She looked small. She looked broken. The sugar pills I had swapped were keeping her body safe from the chemical poison, but they could not protect her mind from the venom Gavin was spitting at her. He stopped pacing and leaned down, getting right in her face. Through the high-definition audio feed, his voice was crisp and devoid of any warmth. "You know why he left." "Right," Gavin said softly. "You think he went to a nursing home because he is sick. That is a lie, Zoe. He left because he cannot stand to look at you anymore." Zoe shook her head, burying her face in her hands. "That is not true," she sobbed. "He loves me." "Does he?" Gavin asked, his voice dripping with mock pity. "Just like he loved your mother." I froze in the van. My hand gripped the edge of the console so hard the plastic creaked. "Do not go there, Gavin. Do not you dare speak her name," Gavin continued, relentless. "You were too young to remember the details, Zoe. But I read the police reports. I read the hospital logs. Your mother did not just die of a heart attack. She died because she was alone. She called your father 3 times that night. 3 times, Zoe. And do you know where he was?" Zoe was rocking back and forth now, covering her ears. "Stop it, Gavin. Please stop." "He was working," Gavin shouted, pulling her hands away from her ears. "He was chasing some embezzlement case in Detroit. He ignored her calls. He chose his job over his wife, and when he finally came home, she was already cold. He let her die, Zoe, and now he is leaving you too, because that is what he does. He abandons the women who need him." A roar of pure primal rage erupted from my throat, filling the small van. It was a lie, a twisted half-truth weaponized to destroy her. Lucille had called me, yes, but I was on a plane. I was flying home to surprise her for our anniversary. By the time I landed, she was gone. It was the greatest tragedy of my life, the guilt I carried every single day. And watching this man, this monster, use my grief to sever the bond between me and my daughter was agonizing. I watched Zoe on the screen. The fight went out of her. Her shoulders slumped. The sobbing stopped, replaced by a terrifying silence. She looked at the coffee table where the bottle of pills sat. "You are right," she whispered, her voice hollow. "I am just a burden, just like Mom was." Gavin straightened up, adjusting his cuffs. He looked at her with cold indifference. "Take your medicine, Zoe. It will help you sleep. Maybe when you wake up, the pain will be gone." He turned and walked into the kitchen, leaving her alone with the bottle. This was the moment, the breaking point. I watched in horror as Zoe reached out. Her hand was shaking. She picked up the amber bottle. She did not pour out 2 pills. She poured a handful, then another. She dumped the entire contents onto the table, a mountain of blue capsules. My heart stopped. I had swapped the pills in her travel case, yes. But was this that bottle, or was this a new one Gavin had brought from the pharmacy? Even if they were sugar pills, the sheer volume could choke her. And the intent. My God, the intent. My little girl was trying to end her life because she believed she was unlovable. I had to move. I grabbed the door handle of the van. I could be there in 3 minutes. I could kick down the door and wrap her in my arms. I could tell her the truth. But if I did that, Gavin would win. He would spin it. He would say I broke in. He would say I was violent. He would have me arrested, and he would still have power of attorney over Zoe. He would bury her in a facility where I could never reach her again. I hesitated, my hand trembling on the latch. The struggle was physical. Every instinct screamed run to her, but every year of training screamed hold the line. Zoe picked up a handful of pills. She brought them to her mouth. I cannot run in, but I can reach her. I spun back to the console. I pulled up the interface for the smart home system. I had installed hidden speakers in the living room vents years ago, part of a security system I never told anyone about. I routed my microphone through a voice modulation software. I set it to deep, distorted, and unrecognizable. I put on the headset. Zoe. I commanded my voice booming through the walls of the house like the voice of God. On the screen, Zoe jumped. The pills scattered from her hand, falling onto the floor. She looked around wildly, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. "Who is there?" she whispered. I leaned into the mic, keeping my voice steady and authoritative. "Put the bottle down, Zoe." She stood up, spinning in a circle. Is this God?" "I am the one watching over you," I said. "You are not a burden. You are a warrior. The man in the kitchen is a liar. Do not let him win. Do not let him erase you." Zoe was trembling, looking at the ceiling, but he said, "My dad. Your father loves you more than his own life," I said, forcing the emotion out of my voice. "He is fighting for you right now, but you have to fight too. Protocol. Bluebird Zoe. Remember the bluebird?" Zoe froze. The code word. The anchor I had given her. I saw the recognition flash in her eyes, cutting through the fog of the drugs and the grief. She looked at the scattered pills on the floor. Then she looked at the kitchen door where Gavin was oblivious to the sound because of the noise of the ice maker. She swept the pills off the table. She stood up straighter. "Bluebird," she whispered. "Go to your room," I commanded. "Lock the door. Do not come out until the sun rises." Zoe nodded. She did not ask questions. She grabbed her blueprints, clutching them to her chest like a shield, and ran up the stairs. I slumped back in my chair, tearing the headset off. My shirt was soaked with sweat. I checked the heart rate monitor on my watch. 140. I took a deep breath, forcing my pulse to slow. She was safe. For tonight, she was safe. But the war was not over. On the kitchen camera, Gavin was on the phone. He had not heard the voice from the vents. He was pouring himself a drink, leaning against the counter with a relaxed arrogance that made my skin crawl. He was talking to Bella again. I turned up the volume on the parabolic microphone. "She is breaking," Gavin said, taking a sip of scotch. I pushed the button about her mother. It worked like a charm. "She is sitting in the living room, staring at the pills right now. I give it 10 minutes before she swallows the whole bottle." He paused, listening to Bella on the other end. "No, I do not feel bad," he laughed. "Why should I? Do you know who her father really is, Bella?" I leaned closer to the screen. What did he know? "His name is not just Winston Carter," Gavin said, his voice dropping to a sinister growl. 30 years ago, he went by Agent Carter. He was the lead auditor on the RICO case against the Miller Construction Group. My blood ran cold. The Miller case. It was one of the biggest busts of my career. We took down a corrupt development firm that was laundering money for the cartels. The CEO was a man named Arthur Miller. He died in federal prison 3 years into his sentence. That was my father. Gavin spat the words out. "Winston Carter put my father in a cage like an animal. He destroyed my family. He took our house, our money, our reputation. I grew up in a trailer park because of him." I stared at the screen, stunned. Gavin Miller. Arthur Miller. The connection had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. I had been so focused on protecting Zoe's money that I had missed the vendetta. This was not just about greed. This was about revenge. A slow, painful, calculated revenge. He wanted to do to my family exactly what I had done to his. He wanted to take my house, my money, and my child. So no, I do not feel bad. Gavin continued, his eyes dark and full of hate. I want him to suffer. I want him to receive that phone call tomorrow morning telling him his daughter is dead. I want him to feel the same helplessness I felt when I watched them drag my dad away in handcuffs. He poured another drink, looking at the ceiling toward the room where Zoe was hiding. "Tomorrow is the presentation," he said. "I will take credit for the Skyline project. I will secure the bonus. And then once the money is transferred." He paused, and a cruel smile spread across his face. "If she does not finish the job tonight, I will do it for her. I have the car ready." The mechanic loosened the brake line just enough. "After the presentation, I will tell her to drive herself home. She will never make it past the highway curve. I will tiptoe her right off the edge of the world, just like her daddy pushed my father." He raised his glass to the empty kitchen. "To justice," he whispered. I sat in the silence of the van, staring at the man who wanted to murder my daughter. The missing piece of the puzzle had finally clicked into place. He was not just a greedy husband. He was a monster created by my own past. I reached into my bag and pulled out my old service pistol. I checked the magazine. It was full. "You want justice, Gavin?" I said to the screen, my voice low and dangerous. I holstered the weapon. "You have no idea what justice looks like. But tomorrow, when you walk into that boardroom, you are going to find out. And this time, I am not bringing handcuffs. I am bringing the whole damn building down on top of you." The boardroom on the 45th floor of the Harrison Tower was designed to make you feel small. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline that my daughter was born to reshape. In the center of the room sat a mahogany table long enough to land a plane on. Around it sat 12 of the most powerful real estate moguls in the Midwest. They were men and women who could make or break a career with a single stroke of a pen. And standing at the head of the table, commanding their attention like a preacher at a revival, was Gavin Miller. I watched the live feed from the security camera inside the smoke detector. The image was crisp. I could see the sweat beading on Gavin's forehead, not from nerves, but from the exhilaration of the theft. He looked immaculate. His navy suit was tailored to perfection. His hair was swept back. He held a laser pointer in one hand and clicked through the slides with the other. "This structure is not just a building," Gavin said, his voice smooth and projecting confidence. "It is a living organism. The load-bearing truss system I designed allows for an open-air atrium on the 30th floor that defies gravity. It is a revolution in vertical living." I gripped the edge of the console in my surveillance van. "I designed." He said it without a stutter. He was claiming credit for the sleepless nights Zoe spent calculating wind shear. He was claiming credit for the genius that flowed through her veins. The chairman, Mr. Harrison, leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. He looked impressed. "Remarkable," Gavin Harrison said. "The structural integrity calculations for that atrium must have been a nightmare. How did you solve the vibration issue from the L-train tracks below?" Gavin did not hesitate. He flashed a charming smile. "It required a unique dampening system in the foundation using hydraulic counterweights. It came to me in a dream, actually. I woke up at 3 in the morning and sketched it out on a napkin." "Liar. You were asleep at 3 in the morning while Zoe was crying over her drafting table." Harrison nodded, turning to the other board members. "This is exactly the kind of innovation we need. It is bold. It is fresh. I think we have found our lead architect." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Bella, who was sitting in the back row as a consultant, beamed with pride. She gave Gavin a subtle thumbs up. They thought they had won. They thought the finish line was crossed. They thought Zoe was dead or in a coma somewhere on the side of a highway. I looked at the time on my monitor. It was 10:00 a.m. exactly. Showtime. I pressed the button on my walkie-talkie. Bluebird is a go. On the screen, I saw the heavy double doors at the back of the boardroom begin to open. They did not fly open. They opened slowly, deliberately. The sound of the heavy oak scraping against the plush carpet made a few heads turn. But when the figure stepped into the light, the entire room went deadly silent. It was Zoe. But it was not the Zoe they had seen at the party. It was not the fragile, drugged woman stumbling over her own feet. This was a resurrection. She was wearing a charcoal gray power suit that fit her like armor. Her hair was pulled back into a tight, severe ponytail that accentuated the sharp angles of her face. She wore no jewelry. She carried no bag. She walked into that room with the cold, terrifying grace of a queen returning to reclaim her throne. Gavin stopped mid-sentence. The laser pointer in his hand shook violently, sending the red dot dancing across the screen like a frantic insect. His face went pale. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Zoe walked down the length of the long table. The rhythmic click of her heels on the floorboards was the only sound in the room. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a countdown. She did not look at the board members. She did not look at Bella. She kept her eyes locked on Gavin. Zoe Harrison stood up, looking confused. We did not expect you. Gavin said you were unwell. He said you were in the hospital." Zoe stopped 3 feet from Gavin. She stood toe-to-toe with him. She was shorter than him, but in that moment she looked 10 feet tall. "I am feeling much better, Mr. Harrison," Zoe said, her voice clear and steady. "The medication my husband was giving me had some unfortunate side effects, but I stopped taking it. And suddenly my mind is very clear." Gavin recovered his voice. It was shrill, bordering on panic. "Zoe, what are you doing here? You should be resting. You are not well. You are having an episode." He turned to the board, a desperate smile plastered on his face. "Please excuse her. She is delusional. I tried to protect her from the stress, but she escaped her caregivers. I need to call security." He reached for his phone. "Do not bother," Zoe said. "Security is already here." She pointed to the back of the room. The door opened again, but it was not security guards. It was 2 men in suits. My old colleagues from the fraud division. They stood quietly by the door, arms crossed, waiting. Gavin looked trapped. He laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "This is ridiculous. I am in the middle of a presentation, Zoe. Go home. We will talk about this later." "We are done talking," Gavin, Zoe said. "And you are right. You are in the middle of a presentation, but you seem to be having trouble with your slides. Let me help you with the next part." She looked directly into the camera lens hidden in the smoke detector. She knew I was watching. She gave a single nod. That was my cue. I sat up straight in the van. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I had spent the last 2 hours splicing the footage, syncing the audio, and embedding it into the building's presentation server. I hit the enter key. Strike him down. In the boardroom, the massive screen behind Gavin flickered. The beautiful rendering of the skyline tower vanished. The room plunged into momentary darkness as the projector reset. Then a new video began to play. The audio was deafeningly loud, pumped through the room's surround sound system. It was not a building. It was a bedroom, my guest bedroom. On the screen, giant versions of Gavin and Bella were lying in bed drinking champagne. The timestamp was from last night, just hours after I had left. The board members gasped. Harrison's jaw dropped. Bella sat in the back, covering her mouth with her hand. But the visuals were not the worst part. It was the audio. "I cannot believe how easy it was," Gavin's voice boomed through the boardroom, echoing off the glass walls. "The old man is gone. Zoe is practically a vegetable." On screen, Gavin took a sip of champagne and laughed. "Harrison and those other board members are a bunch of old pigs," he continued. "They are so desperate for a young genius they will buy anything I sell them. I could draw a stick figure and tell them it is minimalism, and they would write me a check." The atmosphere in the boardroom shifted instantly from shock to fury. Harrison's face turned a deep shade of purple. The other investors looked at each other with disgust. On the screen, Bella giggled. But what if Zoe wakes up? What if she figures out the blueprints are hers? Gavin on the screen sneered. "She won't. I have been drugging her for months. By tomorrow she will be lucky if she can remember her own name. And if she becomes a problem, well, accidents happen on the highway." The video cut to black. Silence. Absolute, heavy, suffocating silence. Gavin stood on the stage, frozen. He looked small now. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind a trembling coward. He looked at the screen, then at the board, then at Zoe. Harrison stood up slowly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He did not look at the presentation. He looked at Gavin with a hatred that could melt steel. "Old pigs," Harrison repeated quietly. Gavin held up his hands. No, wait. That is fake. That is a deep fake. She hacked the system. She is crazy. I told you she is crazy." He pointed a shaking finger at Zoe. "You did this," he screamed, saliva flying from his mouth. "You set me up. You jealous witch. You could not stand that I was better than you, so you made this up. Turn it off," he yelled at the empty projection booth. "Turn it off!" He lunged toward the laptop on the podium, trying to smash it, trying to stop the truth from bleeding out. But Zoe stepped in his way. She did not flinch. She grabbed his wrist mid-air. She twisted it, hard. Gavin yelped, dropping to one knee. "It is not a deep fake, Gavin," Zoe said, looking down at him with eyes that were dry and cold. "It is a memory. And I have thousands more just like it." She released him and he scrambled back, hitting the podium, knocking it over. Harrison turned to the two men at the back of the room. "Gentlemen," Harrison said, his voice shaking with rage, "please remove this piece of filth from my building before I throw him out the window myself." Gavin scrambled to his feet, looking for an exit, looking for an ally. He looked at Bella, but she was already gone, slipping out the side door to save herself. He was alone. He looked at Zoe one last time. His eyes were wild, desperate, and dangerous. "You think you won," he hissed. "You think this is over. You have no idea what I am capable of." Zoe smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Oh, I know exactly what you are capable of, Gavin," she said. "That is why I did not come alone." She gestured to the door. "And that is when I walked in. I was not wearing my gardener's clothes. I was wearing my old FBI field jacket, the one I had not worn in 5 years. I walked in with my cane, but I was not leaning on it. I was carrying it like a weapon." Gavin saw me, and for the first time in his miserable life, he realized that the game was not just rigged. It was over. The silence that followed the video was heavier than the steel beams of the skyscraper my daughter had designed. It hung in the air, thick and suffocating. All 12 board members were staring at the blank screen where moments ago they had seen Gavin Miller laughing about their incompetence. Then, slowly like a turret turning toward a target, every single head turned to look at him. Gavin was trembling. The laser pointer had slipped from his sweaty grip and clattered onto the floor, rolling away under the table. He looked at Harrison, the chairman, who was slowly rising from his seat. Harrison's face was a mask of controlled fury. "Mr. Harrison," Gavin stammered, holding up his hands. "You cannot believe that. It is obviously a deep fake. My wife has hired a professional to smear me. She is mentally unstable. I told you this would happen." Harrison did not speak. He just looked at Gavin with a mixture of pity and disgust. Then I stepped forward. The tap of my cane on the floorboards echoed through the room. I walked past the security guards who had let me in and stood right next to Zoe. She looked at me, and for the first time in months, her eyes were clear. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. She was ready. "Who allowed this man in here?" Gavin shouted, pointing at me. "Security, get this old invalid out of here. He is trespassing." Actually, Harrison said, his voice low and dangerous. "He is not trespassing, Gavin. In fact, he has more right to be here than you do." Gavin blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "He is a retired gardener. He lives in my guest room." Harrison looked at me. "Mr. Carter, would you like to explain, or should I?" I straightened my tie. I looked Gavin dead in the eye. "You never were very good at due diligence, Gavin," I said, my voice steady and commanding. "If you had looked into the ownership structure of this firm, you would have noticed that 6 months ago, a company called Pegasus Holdings bought a 15% stake in this architectural group." Gavin sneered. "So what? Some shell company bought some stock. Who cares?" "I care," I said, "because I am Pegasus Holdings." The color drained from Gavin's face so fast he looked like a corpse. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I did not just retire from the FBI with a pension, son. I continued taking a step closer to him. I made smart investments. And when I saw my daughter working herself to death for this company, I decided to buy a seat at the table to make sure she was treated fairly. I am not just her father. I am your boss. And as a major shareholder, I have some questions about this project you claim to have designed. I turned to the board. If Mr. Miller is truly the architect behind the Skyline initiative, he should have no trouble answering 3 basic technical questions about the structural engineering. Harrison nodded, sitting back down. "Proceed, Mr. Carter." I walked over to the model of the building that sat in the center of the table. I pointed to the complex glass atrium on the 30th floor. "Question 1, I said loud and clear. The atrium hangs over the L train tracks. The vibration from the trains creates a resonance frequency of 40 hertz. Glass shatters at 40 hertz. How did you solve the resonance issue without using opaque concrete supports?" Gavin swallowed hard. He looked at the model, then at me, then at the board. Sweat was now running down his neck, soaking his collar. Well, he began, his voice shaking. "We used high-quality glass, imported from Germany. It is very strong, and we added rubber gaskets to absorb the shock." I looked at him with zero emotion. "Rubber gaskets. That is your answer?" Gavin nodded vigorously. "Yes, special industrial rubber." I turned to Zoe. "Mrs. Miller, would you like to correct him?" Zoe stepped forward. She did not look at Gavin. She looked at the board. Rubber gaskets would fail within 6 months due to thermal expansion. She said, her voice crisp and professional. "To solve the resonance at 40 hertz, I designed a liquid-tuned mass damper system hidden within the window frames. It uses a glycol solution to counter-oscillate against the vibration. It cancels the noise and the shaking completely." Harrison raised an eyebrow, looking at Zoe with new respect. "A liquid damper in the frame. That is brilliant." Gavin's face turned red. I meant to say that. That is what I meant. The liquid rubber thing." I cut him off. "Question 2. I pointed to the spire at the very top of the building. The wind shear at that altitude in Chicago can reach 100 miles per hour. A flat surface creates a vortex shedding effect that could rip the antenna off. What is the drag coefficient of this spire design?" Gavin wiped his forehead with his sleeve. He was drowning, and everyone in the room knew it. "The coefficient is standard," he stammered. "It is a standard aerodynamic design. It is very wind resistant. We tested it in a tunnel. It is fine." I stared at him. "It is fine. That is your technical analysis." Zoe spoke up before I even asked. The drag coefficient is 0.35, she said. But the real issue is not the drag, it is the ice. That is why the spire is heated internally using waste heat recycled from the HVAC system. It prevents ice sheets from forming and falling onto pedestrians below. Harrison leaned forward, looking at the blueprints. She is right. The heating system is detailed right here on page 50. Gavin, why did you not mention the heating system? Gavin was backing away now. I forgot. It is a small detail. There are thousands of details. I took one more step toward him. I was right in his face now. I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like victory. Question 3, I whispered. And this is the easiest one. I pointed to the title block on the bottom right corner of the blueprints displayed on the table. What is the password to unlock the source file on the server? Gavin froze. He looked at the laptop. He looked at the screen. I have it written down, he stuttered. It is on my phone. I changed it recently for security. I looked at Zoe. Zoe smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was triumphant. The password, she said softly, is Lucille. Lucille. I felt a lump in my throat. My wife's name. Harrison typed into the laptop connected to the projector. He hit enter. On the big screen, the file opened. And there, at the bottom of every single layer in the metadata, was a digital signature, created by Zoe Carter. The room was silent again, but this time it was the silence of judgment. Harrison stood up. He did not look at Gavin with anger anymore. He looked at him like he was a stain on the carpet. Mr. Miller, Harrison said, his voice ice cold. You are fired. Gavin flinched as if he had been slapped. Harrison continued. Not only are you fired, but I am instructing our legal team to file charges for corporate espionage, fraud, and theft of intellectual property. You will never work in this city again. You will never work in this industry again. Security, get him out of my sight. 2 large security guards stepped forward, grabbing Gavin by the arms. No, Gavin screamed, struggling against their grip. You cannot do this. I brought you this deal. I am the face of this company. Zoe walked up to him. She stood inches from his face. She reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his company ID badge. You were never the face, she said quietly. You were just the mask. And the mask just fell off. She tossed the badge onto the floor. Get him out, Harrison roared. The guards dragged Gavin toward the double doors. He dug his heels into the carpet, kicking and screaming like a child. His perfect suit was rumpled. His hair was a mess. The facade was completely gone. But just as they reached the door, Gavin stopped fighting. He went limp. Then he started to laugh. It was a low, dry chuckle at first, but it grew into a loud, manic cackle that echoed off the glass walls. It was the sound of a man who had snapped. He looked back at us over his shoulder. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. You think you won? He screamed, his voice cracking. You think firing me ends this? He looked directly at me. You hold the shares, Winston. You hold the money. But I hold the secrets. He grinned, exposing his teeth. I know about the Cayman accounts, Harrison. I know about the bribes you paid to the zoning commission last year. I have the emails. I have the ledgers. Harrison's face went pale. And you, Zoe, Gavin spat. You think you are free. I am still your husband. I still own half of everything. And I know where you buried the bodies in the Skyline budget. He laughed again, a sound that made my skin crawl. Safer to fire me. Safer to kill me. Because if I walk out of this room alive, I am going to the district attorney, and I am taking every single one of you down with me. The guards shoved him through the doors, and they slammed shut, cutting off his laughter, but the echo remained in the room. Harrison looked at me, his hands trembling slightly. Is it true, he asked. Does he have leverage? I looked at the closed doors. He thinks he does, I said, gripping my cane. But he forgot one thing. What is that? Zoe asked, her voice shaking. I turned to face them, my face grim. He forgot that I recorded his threat. And blackmail is a federal crime. I looked at the window at the storm clouds gathering over the city. He is not going to the district attorney, I said. He is going to hell. And I am going to be the one driving the bus. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom did not just open, they burst inward with the force of a battering ram. The sound echoed off the floor to ceiling glass walls, making the wealthy board members jump in their leather chairs. It was not hotel security this time. It was the Economic Crimes Unit of the Chicago Police Department. I had made the call 2 hours ago while sitting in my surveillance van. I had sent Detective Graves, my old partner from the bureau, the entire digital packet, including the video of the confession and the logs of the wire transfers to the Cayman Islands. Graves did not waste time. He walked into the room flanked by 4 uniformed officers, his badge gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Gavin Miller, Detective Graves, announced, his voice booming across the silent room. "You are under arrest for corporate espionage, wire fraud, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit murder." Gavin looked at the officers, and then he looked at the handcuffs hanging from Graves' belt. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting under heat. He took a step back, bumping into the long mahogany table. "This is a mistake," Gavin stammered, his voice pitching up an octave. "You cannot arrest me here. Do you know who I am? I am the lead architect on the Skyline Initiative." "Not anymore, Harrison," the chairman said quietly from his seat. "Officer, grab him," Graves commanded. 2 officers moved forward with practiced efficiency. They grabbed Gavin's arms, pulling them behind his back. The moment they touched him, Gavin snapped. The shock vanished, replaced by a feral, desperate rage. He yanked his arm free with surprising strength. "Get your hands off me," he screamed. "This is harassment. This is police brutality." He spun around, pointing a shaking finger at me. "This is a setup," he yelled, spitting the words out. "Look at him. Look at Winston Carter. Do you people know who he really is? He is not a concerned father-in-law. He is a corrupt ex-Fed who has a vendetta against my family." Gavin looked wildly around the room, trying to make eye contact with the board members, trying to find a sympathetic ear. "He put my father in prison 20 years ago for a crime he did not commit." Gavin shouted, his eyes bulging. "My father died in a cell because of this man, and now he is doing the same thing to me. He planted that evidence. He hacked my computer. He doctored those videos. He is trying to frame me to cover up his own daughter's incompetence." I stood perfectly still, leaning on my cane, letting him dig his own grave. I watched him unravel. It was pathetic, but it was also dangerous. A man who believes his own lies is capable of anything. Zoe stepped forward, her face calm. "Gavin, stop it. It is over. We saw the transfers. We saw the texts to Bella. Just stop lying." "You shut up," Gavin snarled, lunging toward her. The officers tackled him, slamming him face first onto the plush carpet. "You are in on it too," he grunted as they forced his hands behind his back. "You ungrateful little traitor. I made you. You were nothing before me. Just a scared little girl with a sketchbook. I gave you a life. I gave you confidence. And this is how you repay me, by siding with the man who killed your mother." Graves kneeled on Gavin's back, leaning in close. "You have the right to remain silent, Gavin, and I strongly suggest you use it because every word you are screaming is going into my report." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest sound I had heard in years. Click, click, tight and final. They hauled him to his feet. His suit was rumpled, his hair was sticking up in every direction, and his lip was bleeding where it had hit the floor. He looked wild. He looked unhinged. "Take him away," Graves said. But before they could take a step, the doors opened again. "Stop right there," a voice called out. I turned. My heart sank. Walking into the room was not another cop. It was a man in a $3,000 sharkskin suit carrying a leather briefcase. I recognized him immediately. It was Marcus Thorne. He was the most expensive criminal defense attorney in Chicago. He was the kind of lawyer drug lords hired when they wanted to walk free on a technicality, and he was on retainer for Bella's father. Thorne walked straight up to Detective Graves, ignoring the board members, ignoring me, ignoring the chaos. He held up a piece of paper. "This is an emergency bail order signed by Judge Holloway 5 minutes ago," Thorne said, his voice smooth as oil. "My client, Mr. Miller, has no prior convictions and is not considered a flight risk. The arraignment is set for next Tuesday. Until then, he is to be released into my custody immediately." Graves looked at the paper. His jaw tightened. "This man is facing multiple felony charges, counselor. And he just threatened a witness in front of a room full of people. And you can bring that up at the arraignment," Thorne said, smiling a smile that showed too many teeth. "But right now, you are holding him in violation of a court order. Uncuff him, detective, unless you want me to file a suit for unlawful imprisonment against the department before lunch." Graves looked at me. I gave a small, microscopic shake of my head. "Do not fight it, Graves. Not here. Not now." Thorne was a viper. If we pushed, he would twist it into a procedural error and Gavin would walk away with a mistrial later. We had to play the long game. Graves sighed. He pulled the key from his belt. "Turn around," he growled at Gavin. The handcuffs clicked open. Gavin rubbed his wrists, wincing. He took a deep breath, straightening his jacket. He looked at Thorne and nodded. Then he looked at the board members who were watching in stunned silence. "I apologize for this scene," Gavin said, his voice suddenly regaining that fake corporate polish, though it trembled with underlying madness. "As you can see, I am being targeted by a malicious legal attack. I will be vindicated in court. And when I am, I will expect a full apology and reinstatement." He turned to leave but stopped in front of me. He leaned in close. He smelled of sweat and fear, but his eyes were burning with a terrifying clarity. The mask of sanity was slipping, and what was underneath was pure chaos. "You played a good hand, old man," he whispered so only I could hear. "You got my job. You got my reputation. But you forgot one thing." I looked at him, my face like stone. "What is that, Gavin?" "You forgot that I have nothing left to lose," he hissed. "A man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous thing in the world. You should have let the cops keep me. You should have let them lock me up, because now I am free. And I am not going to run. I am going to finish what I started." He looked past me at Zoe. "Tell her to drive safe," he whispered. Then he turned and walked out of the room, flanked by his lawyer, leaving a wake of terrified silence behind him. I watched the doors close. My hands were gripping the head of my cane so hard my knuckles hurt. He was right. We had won the battle, but we had just lost control of the war. A cornered rat will bite, but a released rat will come back with the plague. Graves walked over to me, holstering his weapon. "I am sorry, Winston. The judge is in Bella's father's pocket." I could not hold him. "I know," I said quietly. "It is not your fault." I looked at Zoe. She was standing by the window looking out at the city. She was not shaking anymore. She looked angry. "What do we do now, Dad?" she asked, not turning around. I walked over to her. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Now we stop playing by the rules," I said. "He wants to be a man with nothing to lose. Fine. Let us see how he handles a man who has already lost everything once and swore never to do it again." I took out my phone. I opened the tracking app. The dot on Gavin's car was active. "Go home, Zoe," I said. "Lock the doors. Activate the Bluebird protocol. Do not open the door for anyone but me." "Where are you going?" she asked, looking at me with fear in her eyes. "I am going to finish this," I said. I turned and walked out of the boardroom. Gavin Miller was free. He was unstable, and he was dangerous. But he made one critical error. He thought threatening my daughter would make me afraid. He thought it would make me back down. He was wrong. It just gave me permission to take the gloves off. And tonight, Chicago was going to see what an old auditor could do when he stopped counting numbers and started counting bodies. The victory in the boardroom felt sweet, but like sugar, it dissolved quickly, leaving a bitter aftertaste. We thought we had cut the head off the snake, but we forgot that a snake can still bite even after it is dead. 2 days after Gavin was dragged out of the Harrison Tower, a process server knocked on our front door. He did not look like a threat. He looked like a tired man doing a job, but the envelope he handed Zoe was a declaration of war. I sat at the kitchen table and read the documents. My hands did not shake, but my blood boiled. Gavin and Bella were suing Zoe. They were countersuing for defamation of character, wrongful termination, and emotional distress. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the motion for an emergency competency hearing. They submitted the fake medical logs Gavin had forged. They submitted sworn affidavits from the doctor Gavin had paid off, claiming Zoe was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia and early-onset dementia. They were using the very symptoms Gavin had induced with poison to prove she was unfit to manage her own finances. They wanted a court-appointed conservator, and the person they suggested was Gavin Miller. It was audacious. It was evil. And because the legal system moves slower than a glacier, it was working. Their high-priced lawyer, Marcus Thorne, had convinced a judge to freeze Zoe's assets pending the hearing. We were locked out of the accounts. We could not even pay our own legal fees. Zoe sat across from me, her face pale. "How can they do this?" "Dad," she asked, her voice trembling with rage. "He poisoned me. And now he is using the side effects to steal my life." I put the papers down. "They can do this because they have money, Zoe. Marcus Thorne costs $1,000 an hour. Gavin is broke, but Bella is not. She is bankrolling this entire operation. She is keeping him afloat. She is paying his rent, his lawyer, and his bail bond." I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was gray and heavy, threatening rain. As long as Bella stands behind him, Gavin is dangerous, I said. She is his shield. And if we want to get to him, we have to shatter that shield. I am going to talk to her father. Zoe looked up, surprised. Arthur Sterling, the owner of Sterling Architects. He hates you, Dad. You audited his firm 10 years ago. He does hate me, I agreed, putting on my coat. But there is one thing Arthur Sterling hates more than me, and that is a thief. I drove to the Sterling building in downtown Chicago. It was a monolith of black glass, a testament to Arthur Sterling's ego. I did not have an appointment. I did not need one. I walked up to the security desk and placed a single file folder on the counter. "Tell Mr. Sterling that Winston Carter is here," I said to the guard, "and tell him I have the financial records for the shell company his daughter set up in the Cayman Islands." 5 minutes later, I was in the private elevator rising to the penthouse suite. Arthur Sterling was waiting for me. He was a small man with silver hair and eyes like flint. He sat behind a desk that looked like it cost more than my house. He did not stand up to greet me. "Carter," he spat the name out like a curse word. "You have a lot of nerve coming here. My daughter tells me you and your crazy daughter are harassing her boyfriend." I sat down in the chair opposite him without being invited. I placed the folder on the desk. "Your daughter has a very vivid imagination, Arthur," I said calmly. "But numbers do not have imagination. Numbers do not lie." Sterling looked at the folder but did not touch it. "What is this?" "This," I said, leaning forward, "is proof that for the last 2 years Bella has been skimming off the top of your construction contracts. She has been inflating vendor invoices by 15% and funneling the difference into a private account." Sterling laughed, a dry, humorless bark. "That is impossible. Bella runs my finance division. She is loyal. She is in love, Arthur," I corrected him. "And love makes people do stupid things. She is not stealing for herself. She is stealing to fund Gavin Miller." I opened the folder. I pointed to the spreadsheet I had compiled from the data I extracted from Gavin's iPad. "Look at the dates, Arthur. Every time Gavin needed money for his car payments, his gambling debts, or his legal fees, a transfer was made from your company accounts to a shell corporation called BGM Holdings. BGM stands for Bella Gavin Miller." Sterling stopped laughing. He looked at the numbers. He put on his reading glasses. His face went from red to white. He traced the lines of the transactions with a shaking finger. $2 million, he whispered. "She stole $2 million from me to buy the affection of a man who is using her," I said. "Gavin promised her he would bring the Skyline contract to your firm. That was the deal. She funds him, he steals the designs and brings them to you. But he failed, Arthur. He got fired. He is facing felony charges. And your daughter is using your money to pay for his defense." I sat back watching the realization sink in. Arthur Sterling was a ruthless businessman. He would forgive a lot of things, but he would never forgive someone stealing from his own pocket, not even his own flesh and blood. He hit the intercom button on his desk. His voice was terrifyingly quiet. "Get Bella in here. Now." I stood up. I did not need to stay for the family reunion. My work was done. "You might want to check your corporate credit cards too, Arthur," I said as I buttoned my coat. "I believe she just put a $50,000 retainer for a criminal defense lawyer on the company black card." I walked out of the office. As the elevator doors closed, I heard the sound of Arthur Sterling screaming his daughter's name. It sounded like a building collapsing. By the time I got back to my car, the news had already hit the grapevine. My phone buzzed with a text from my contact at the bank. "Sterling just froze all of Bella's assets. He revoked her signatory powers. She is locked out." I smiled. The shield was shattered. Across town in a luxury hotel room, Gavin Miller was about to have a very bad afternoon. I can only imagine the scene. Bella answering her phone, expecting her father to offer support, only to be told she was fired, disowned, and cut off. The panic, the screaming, and then the realization that the man she sacrificed everything for was a liability she could no longer afford. Gavin would have been sitting on the couch drinking expensive scotch, waiting for the check to clear. And then Bella would have turned on him. "Get out," she would have screamed. "My dad knows everything. He cut me off. It is over, Gavin. Get out." Gavin would have been thrown onto the street with nothing but the clothes on his back. No money, no lawyer, no place to go. But a man like Gavin does not just give up. When you strip away the money, the suits, and the pretense of civilization, you are left with the animal underneath. And Gavin was a cornered animal. That night I sat in my living room with the lights off, watching the street. I knew he was out there. I knew he was desperate. The tracking dot on his car had stopped moving. It was parked in a bad neighborhood on the south side, an area known for chop shops and back alley deals. I zoomed in on the map. He was parked behind a pawn shop. I knew that pawn shop. It was a front for illegal arms dealing. I had investigated it years ago, but we never could get the charges to stick. My stomach churned. Gavin was not looking for a place to sleep. He was not looking for a job. He was looking for a solution, a permanent solution. I watched the dot stay stationary for 20 minutes. Then it started moving again. It was moving fast, and it was heading north, toward the suburbs, toward us. I picked up my phone and called Detective Graves. "He bought a gun," I said, my voice flat. "I do not have proof yet, but he is coming from the South Side Pawn District. He has no money left, Winston. He is coming for you." "I know," I said, checking the magazine of my own service pistol. I stood up and walked to the back door. I locked the deadbolt. I checked the windows. Zoe came down the stairs. She was wearing her pajamas, clutching a mug of tea. She looked at the gun on the table. "Dad?" She whispered, her eyes wide. "What is happening?" "Go upstairs, Zoe," I said gently. "Go into the panic room we built in the master closet. Lock the door. Do not come out until I say the code word. Dad, please." "Protocol, Bluebird Zoe," I commanded. "Go." She hesitated, then turned and ran up the stairs. I heard the heavy click of the panic room door sealing shut. I was alone in the silent house. The rain had started again, tapping against the glass like nervous fingers. I sat in the dark, facing the front door. Gavin Miller had lost his job. He had lost his reputation. He had lost his lover and his funding. He had been stripped of everything that made him feel powerful. Now he was just a man with a gun and a grudge. He thought he was coming to finish the job. He thought he was coming to kill a helpless old man and a weak woman. I rested my hand on my weapon. The cold steel felt familiar. It felt like an old friend. "Come on, Gavin," I whispered to the darkness. "Come and get your justice." I watched the headlights sweep across the front window. A car engine cut off in the driveway. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel. The handle of the front door rattled. Then a heavy kick. Thud. The door frame splintered but held. Another kick. Thud. I raised the gun. I aimed at the center of the door. He was not breaking in to steal. He was breaking in to kill. And I was the only thing standing between the devil and my daughter. Tonight, only one of us was walking out of this house alive. And I had promised my wife on her grave that I would never let anything happen to our little girl. I took a deep breath. I let it out slowly. The third kick came. The wood gave way with a sickening crack. The door swung open, revealing a silhouette framed by the stormy night. Gavin stood there, drenched in rain, his eyes wild, his hand gripping a black pistol. "Honey, I am home," he screamed, his voice cracking with insanity. I did not speak. I simply clicked the safety off. "Welcome to the party, son." The storm outside was not just weather. It was a reflection of the chaos descending upon my home. The wind howled, tearing at the shingles, and the rain lashed against the windows like handfuls of gravel thrown by an angry mob. Inside, the darkness was absolute. Gavin had cut the power at the main breaker box outside before he kicked the door in. He thought he was blinding me. He thought he was taking away my advantage. But he had spent his life in brightly lit boardrooms and air-conditioned offices. I had spent 10 years of my life executing raids in warehouses where the only light came from the muzzle flash of a gun. He did not blind me. He just turned the house into my playground. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, my back pressed against the wall. My breathing was slow and rhythmic, controlled by decades of discipline. I held my service pistol close to my chest, not aiming yet, just waiting. I heard him moving in the foyer. His footsteps were heavy and clumsy. He was breathing hard, panting like a wounded animal. He bumped into the console table, knocking over a vase. The crash of porcelain shattering was deafening in the silence. "Come out!" "Winston." Gavin screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "I know you are in here. Stop hiding like a coward. Come out and face me." He fired a shot blindly into the darkness. Bang! The muzzle flash illuminated the room for a split second, a jagged burst of white light that burned an afterimage into my retina. The bullet tore through the drywall 3 feet to my left. He was not aiming. He was panicking. He was trying to kill the darkness itself. I did not move. I did not speak. Not yet. Psychological warfare is about timing. You have to let the enemy stew in their own fear until it boils over and scalds them. I listened to him stumble toward the living room. He was sweeping the gun back and forth, sweeping for targets he could not see. "Where is she?" Gavin yelled. "Where is my wife? Did you hide her too? Zoe, Zoe, come out here. Daddy cannot save you now." I moved. I stepped silently in my socks, sliding across the hardwood floor toward the kitchen. I knew every creak in these floorboards. I knew exactly where to step to remain a ghost. I reached the kitchen island and crouched behind the granite countertop. "You are wasting ammunition, Gavin," I called out, my voice projecting from the darkness, low and calm. "And you are going to need every bullet when the police get here." Gavin spun around, firing 2 more shots toward the kitchen. Bang! Bang! A cabinet door exploded, showering me with wood splinters. A jar of pasta sauce shattered on the shelf behind me. The smell of garlic and tomatoes mixed with the acrid scent of gunpowder. "Shut up," he screamed. "Shut up and die. The police are not coming." I cut the phone lines. I jammed the signal. "It is just you and me, old man. Just you and me." He was lying, or he was delusional. I had called Detective Graves on a secure satellite line 10 minutes ago, but let him believe he is in control. A confident enemy makes mistakes. I moved again, shifting my position to the other side of the island. "You plan to kill us both, is that it?" I asked, my voice echoing off the tile. "And then what? You think you will just walk away? You think you can explain 2 bodies and a broken door?" "I do not have to explain anything." Gavin laughed, a manic wet sound. "It was a break-in. A robbery gone wrong. I came to save you, but I was too late. I will play the grieving hero again. I am good at acting, Winston. You saw the video. I fooled everyone for years." He was moving closer to the kitchen now. I could hear his wet shoes squeaking on the floor. He was getting bold. "I fooled your daughter," he hissed. "I made her love me. I made her trust me. And then I broke her. And tonight, I am going to break you." I stood up slowly behind the refrigerator. I was flanking him. He was focused on where my voice had been, not where I was. "You did not break her, Gavin," I said quietly. "You just woke her up, and you did not fool me. I saw you the moment you walked into this house 2 years ago. I smelled the greed on you like cheap cologne." He spun toward my voice, raising the gun. "There you are," he snarled. He fired again. The bullet hit the refrigerator door with a metallic clang. He charged forward, rushing into the kitchen, blindly expecting to find a cowering old man. But I was not behind the refrigerator anymore. I had moved to the pantry doorway. I stepped out behind him. "Drop it, Gavin." He whirled around, wild-eyed. He saw me. He saw the gun in my hand, but he did not drop his weapon. He raised it, screaming a sound of pure hate. "Die." He pulled the trigger. Click. The gun jammed. Cheap ammunition. Or maybe he had limp-wristed the grip in his panic, causing a failure to eject. It did not matter. Fate had given me an opening, and I took it. He stared at the gun in horror, pulling the trigger again and again. Click, click, click. My turn. I did not shoot him. Shooting him was too easy. Shooting him would give him a quick exit. I wanted him to feel the ground come up to meet him. I holstered my weapon and closed the distance in 2 strides. He tried to pistol whip me, swinging the heavy gun at my head. It was a clumsy, slow bar fight move. I stepped inside his guard. I blocked his arm with my left forearm, deflecting the blow upward. At the same time, I drove the palm of my right hand into his chin. The sound of his teeth clicking together was sickeningly loud. His head snapped back. He stumbled, but he did not fall. He was fueled by adrenaline and rage. He swung his other fist, a wild haymaker aimed at my ribs. I caught his wrist. I twisted his arm behind his back, using his own momentum against him. It was a standard Krav Maga disarm, simple and brutal. I applied pressure to the elbow joint. He screamed, dropping the gun. It clattered across the floor, sliding under the table. I kicked his legs out from under him. He hit the floor hard, face first. I dropped my knee onto his spine, pinning him to the ground. I grabbed his right arm, the one he used to sign the stolen checks, the one he used to hold my daughter, and I pulled it up until I felt the resistance of the shoulder socket. "Stay down!" I growled into his ear. "Get off me!" he shrieked, thrashing like a fish on a deck. "You are breaking my arm." "You broke my daughter's heart," I whispered, tightening my grip. "Consider this a down payment on the debt." He tried to bite me, snapping his teeth at my arm. He was not a man anymore. He was a beast. I slammed his face into the floor once hard enough to stun him. "Stop fighting, Gavin. It is over." "No," he sobbed, dirt and blood mixing on his face. "It is not over. I will kill you. I will kill you all. I am Gavin Miller. I am a genius. You are nobody. You are just a gardener. I am the man who just took you down without firing a shot," I said. Suddenly the room was flooded with red and blue light. The sirens wailing outside cut through the storm. Tires screeched in the driveway. Car doors slammed. "Police, open up." The front door, which was already hanging off its hinges, was kicked fully open. Detective Graves stormed in his weapon drawn, flanked by 4 tactical officers. Their flashlights cut through the gloom, blinding us. "Drop the weapon," Graves shouted. "He is unarmed," I yelled, shielding my eyes. "I have him pinned. Kitchen floor." The officers swarmed us. 2 of them grabbed Gavin, pulling him off the floor. I stood up, backing away, putting my hands up to show I was clear. Gavin was struggling, spitting blood, screaming obscenities. "He tried to kill me," Gavin yelled, pointing at me with his good arm. "Arrest him. He broke my arm. He is crazy." Graves walked over to me. He looked at the gun on the floor. He looked at the bullet holes in the walls. He looked at Gavin, who was foaming at the mouth. "You okay?" Winston Graves asked, lowering his gun. "I am fine," I said, straightening my jacket. "But he made a mess of my kitchen." Graves turned to Gavin. "Gavin Miller, you are under arrest for attempted murder, breaking and entering, violation of a restraining order, and possession of an illegal firearm." "Attempted murder," Gavin screamed as they cuffed him again. "I did not kill anyone." "You fired 4 shots at a federal officer," Graves said calmly. Gavin froze. "What?" Graves pointed at me. "Winston Carter is a retired federal agent, but tonight I reactivated his status as a consultant for this operation. You just tried to kill a Fed. That is a federal crime, son. That means no bail. That means no fancy lawyers. That means you are going to a supermax." The fight went out of Gavin instantly. His knees buckled. The officers had to hold him up. He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. "You set me up," he whispered. "I did not set you up, Gavin," I said, walking closer to him, picking up my cane from where I had left it. "I just let you be yourself." "Take him away," Graves ordered. They dragged him out. He did not go quietly. He started screaming a long, primal wail of despair that echoed through the house and out into the rainy night. I watched them shove him into the back of the cruiser. I watched the door slam shut, extinguishing his screams. The house fell silent. The wind was still howling outside, but inside the air was still. The smell of gunpowder lingered. The shattered vase lay in the foyer. The bullet holes marred the walls. My home was wounded. It was scarred. But it was standing. I walked to the bottom of the stairs. I looked up toward the closet where my daughter was hiding. "Bluebird." I called out, my voice tired but steady. "Protocol." "Bluebird is clear." I heard the lock click. Then the door opened. Zoe stepped out. She looked down at the destruction. She looked at me standing amidst the ruin of the kitchen. She did not run. She walked down the stairs slowly. She walked over to me and wrapped her arms around my waist, burying her face in my chest. She was shaking. "Is he gone?" she whispered. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of lavender and rain. "Yes, baby," I said. "The wolf is gone." And this time I promised myself, holding her tight, he was never coming back. We had survived the storm, but looking at the wreckage of our lives, I knew the hardest part was not the fight. It was going to be the cleanup. The sound of a gavel hitting a wooden block is short and sharp. It does not echo. It simply ends things. 30 days after the police dragged Gavin Miller out of my kitchen in handcuffs, I sat in the back row of the federal district court and watched the final chapter of his destruction. He did not look like the arrogant architect anymore. The designer suits were gone, replaced by a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His hair, which he used to spend an hour styling every morning, was shaved close to his scalp. He did not look at the judge. He did not look at the jury. And he certainly did not look at us. The federal prosecutor did not need to be theatrical. The evidence I had gathered was overwhelming. The video of the confession, the logs of the wire transfers to the Cayman Islands, the testimony of the mechanic who loosened the brake lines on Zoe's car, and of course the attempted murder of a federal agent. When the judge read the sentence, the courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. 20 years in a federal penitentiary with no possibility of parole for the first 15. Gavin did not scream. He did not cry. He just slumped forward as if the strings holding him up had finally been cut. As the marshals led him away, the chains around his ankles rattled against the floor. It was a cold, metallic sound. The sound of a man who had traded his freedom for greed and lost everything. Zoe sat beside me. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She watched him walk through the side door and disappear into the system. When the door clicked shut, she took a deep breath. It was the first breath she had taken in years that did not belong to him. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright Chicago afternoon. The press was there, of course. The story of the architect who tried to kill his wife and father-in-law had been front-page news for weeks. But Zoe did not hide. She walked past the cameras with her head held high. She stopped at the bottom of the steps where her lawyer was waiting with a document. "It is done," the lawyer said, handing her a pen. Zoe took the paper. It was the final decree of divorce. She signed it against the hood of the car. Her hand was steady. Her signature was bold. She handed the paper back. Then she looked at me and smiled. "Let us go home, Dad." That night the house felt different. The bullet holes in the walls had been patched and painted over. The broken door had been replaced with reinforced steel. But the real change was in the air. The heaviness was gone. The smell of fear was gone. It was 2 a.m. I found myself in the kitchen just like that first night, but this time the lights were on. The kettle was whistling softly on the stove. Zoe was sitting at the island, not slumped over in exhaustion, but reading a book. She looked up as I walked in. "I knew you would be up," she said, pouring 2 mugs of tea. Old habits die hard. I sat down across from her. The steam from the tea curled between us. I looked at her. She looked younger. The dark circles under her eyes were fading. The spark had returned. "Zoe," I said quietly, wrapping my hands around the warm mug, "we need to talk. There are things I have not told you, things about who I am." She took a sip of tea, watching me over the rim of the mug. "You mean about the fact that you are not just a retired government employee living on a fixed pension?" I blinked, surprised. "You know," Zoe smiled. "Dad, you hired the most expensive forensic team in the city to audit Gavin. You bought a 15% stake in my company through a shell corporation called Pegasus Holdings, and you rebuilt the entire security system of this house in a single afternoon. I might have been drugged before, but I am not blind." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "I never wanted to lie to you, Zoe. When your mother died, I liquidated everything. The investments, the properties, the offshore accounts from my consulting days. I put it all into trusts. I wanted to live a simple life. I wanted to be just a gardener. I thought if I looked poor, if I looked weak, the world would leave us alone." I reached across the table and took her hand. "But when I saw what he was doing to you, I realized that being harmless was not a virtue. It was a liability. I bought Pegasus Holdings not to control you, but to catch him. I needed access to the books." I paused, looking at the kitchen counter where Gavin used to stand and lecture her. "I am a wealthy man, Zoe. The money I recovered from the Cayman accounts, plus the appreciation of my own assets, means you never have to work another day in your life if you do not want to. We can sell this house. We can move to Italy. We can grow grapes and forget the name Gavin Miller ever existed." Zoe squeezed my hand. Her eyes were wet, but she was not crying. "I do not want to run away, Dad," she said softly. "And I do not want to stop working. That building, the Skyline Initiative, it is mine. I designed every beam. I calculated every angle. If I walk away now, I let him win. I let him take my passion." She stood up and walked to the refrigerator. She pulled out a new set of blueprints. She spread them on the island. "I bought out the other partners," she said, "with a little help from a silent investor named Pegasus Holdings." I smiled. "So you are the CEO now?" "I am the CEO," Zoe corrected, "and the lead architect. And the first thing I did was rename the building. It is not the Skyline Initiative anymore." She pointed to the title block, the Lucille Tower. I felt a lump form in my throat. I looked at the name written in bold, elegant letters, my wife's name. rising 100 stories into the air, watching over the city she loved. "It is perfect," I whispered. Zoe walked around the island and hugged me. She rested her head on my shoulder just like she did when she was a little girl. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself." I held her tight, closing my eyes. "I did not save you, Zoe," I said. "I just reminded you of who you are. You saved yourself. You walked into that boardroom. You stood up to him. I just opened the door." We stood there in the quiet kitchen, father and daughter survivors of a war no one else saw coming. The storm had passed. The sun was getting ready to rise on a new day. And for the first time in a long time, I was not worried about what the morning would bring. 6 months later, life has found a new rhythm. I am back in the garden. The hydrangeas are blooming better than ever this year. The soil is rich and dark under my fingernails. Neighbors walk by and wave. They see an old man in a straw hat pruning his bushes. They say, "Hello, Winston, your garden looks lovely." I smile and wave back. They have no idea that the old man is carrying a concealed weapon and monitoring an encrypted security grid that covers a 3-block radius. Gavin is currently in a federal prison in Indiana. I have a contact on the inside, a guard who owes me a favor. He tells me Gavin spends his days in the library reading law books, trying to find a loophole in his sentence. He will not find one. I wrote the case file myself. It is watertight, but let him look. Hope is a cruel thing to give a man who has no future. Zoe comes over for dinner every Sunday. She drives a new car. She wears her hair down. She laughs loud and real. The Lucille Tower is halfway built. The steel skeleton is already changing the shape of the city. She brings me photos of the progress. She tells me about the board meetings where she sits at the head of the table. She tells me about firing the people who doubted her and hiring young, hungry architects who remind her of herself. She is happy. She is strong. She is free. Sometimes I sit on the porch in the evening and watch the sun go down. I think about the night I found her asleep at her desk. I think about the blue light of the phone and the email that started it all. It scares me sometimes how close we came to the edge. If I had not woken up for a glass of water, if I had been just a little more senile, if I had been just a gardener. But I was not. People say that children need protection. They say you should shield them from the harsh realities of the world. They say you should keep them in a bubble where nothing can hurt them. I used to believe that. I tried to do that for Zoe. I bought her a house. I gave her money. I tried to give her a perfect life. And that bubble almost killed her. It blinded her to the snake in her bed. I look at my hands. They are wrinkled now, covered in dirt, but they are still strong. I have learned that being a father is not about building a wall around your child. Walls can be climbed, walls can be broken. Being a father is about teaching your child how to fight. It is about showing them where the enemy hides. It is about handing them the weapon when the time comes. I watched Zoe drive away last night. Her taillights faded into the distance. She does not need me to protect her anymore. She checks her own accounts. She secures her own data. She trusts, but she verifies. She is not safe because I am watching her. She is safe because she learned how to watch out for herself. I pick up my trowel and dig into the earth. Protecting a child is not about keeping them in a glass cage. It is about giving them the hammer to break the glass cage when the air starts to run out. And if anyone ever tries to build a cage around my daughter again, they will not have to worry about the glass. They will have to worry about the gardener. And I have a lot of very sharp tools. I used to believe that love meant shielding my daughter from the darkness of the world. But I learned that the most profound act of love is not building walls to keep the monsters out. It is teaching your child how to slay them. Zoe did not survive because I saved her. She survived because she found the steel in her own spine. We often mistake silence for peace and compliance for loyalty, but true strength is often quiet, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Never underestimate the ones who listen more than they speak. We are not hiding from the world. We are just waiting for the right moment to set things right. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more life stories. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to rebuild your life from scratch. Until next time, stay sharp and watch your back.